Now that we understand the concept of branding better, let's move on and ask the next question. Is it possible to brand a country like a product? Why do we want to do that? And if it is possible, what are some strategies to do so? And what are the key issues and implications of such practices? In a globalized world in which we live, every place has to compete with every other place for a share of mind, a share of income, a share of talent, and a share of voice. It is so much easier for a country with a powerful and positive image to attract tourists, foreign investment, students and researchers, international events, and the attention and respect of other governments. On the other hand, a country with very little visibility or a negative reputation would find it much more difficult and expensive to compete for limited global resources. Using policy advisor Simon Enholt's words, countries in good standing trade at a premium. Countries in poor standing trade at a discount. Therefore, nation branding becomes a strategic process that allows national governments to utilize corporate marketing concepts and techniques to better manage and control the image they project to the world, enhancing their representation and reputation in international relations. In other words, a nation branding is the mix of core characteristics that make a country distinctive, memorable, and competitive. In her influential book, Branding the Nation, The Global Business of National Identity, Dr. Melissa Aronchak described nation branding as a result of both public and commercial sector interests to communicate national priorities among domestic and international populations for a variety of interrelated purposes. One dimension of nation branding is to generate physical advantage. As such, it helps the nation-state compete for international capital in areas such as tourism, foreign investment, trade, higher education, and skilled labor. Another dimension to think about is that nation branding helps nation-states convey an image of legitimacy and authority in diplomatic arenas so that state leaders and political elites can earn a seat at the table in multilateral decisions or membership in international institutions. In this capacity, it can be used for dual purposes. In a reactive manner, nation branding can be used to avoid unwanted international attention. In a more proactive way, nation branding is practiced to repair the reputation damaged by political and economic legacies. Finally, nation branding can also help the nation-state foster domestic consensus as well as a sense of pride and patriotism through the positive foreign public opinion that boomerangs back home. At the end of the 90s, policy advisor Simon Enholt developed the nation brand lexicon to further explore the concept of nation branding. According to Enholt, a nation's brand value is determined by the following key areas of national interests. The first is tourism. Tourism is often the most visible element in branding a nation because most public sectors spend lots of money on selling and marketizing the country around the world. A country's tourism appeal is measured through the level of interest in visiting the country and its natural and artificial attractions. The second dimension is exportation, which refers to the reputation of a country's products and services. This aspect examines whether knowing where a product is made increases or decreases the likelihood of it being purchased. For instance, due to the good reputation of German technology, people are more interested in buying German cars. In the meantime, people still have stereotypes about made in China, and might think twice before making such a purchase. Following that, governance also plays a role in the formulation of a nation's brand value. It is typically examined through public opinion about national government competency and fairness, as well as its commitment to global issues. Good governance would attract both global talent and international investment. The level of immigration and investment is measured not only through people's willingness to study, work, or live in that country, but also through the perception of a country's economic prosperity and quality of life. The next factor is the combination of culture and heritage. The cultural aspects are measured by gathering perceptions of a country's heritage and public interest in its contemporary culture, such as music, art, cinema, literature, and sports. And finally, a nation's friendliness, embodied by its people, also increases its brand value. The appeal of people is typically measured on a micro level, such as a close friend from that country, but also on a macro level, how willing respondents would be to hire a well-qualified person from that country. Now that we understand the National Branding Index tool, you might want to know which nation's brand enjoyed the highest value in 2023. And the answer is Japan. This year, Japan has surpassed Germany and ranks first out of 60 nations on the Nation Brands Index, becoming the first nation from the Asia-Pacific region to top the NBI chart. If we look closely at the analysis, Japan's reputation remains strongest on the Exports Index, where it now holds first place on all three attributes: contribution to science and technology, being a creative place, and product appeal. Japan also finds reputational strengths on the people and tourism indices, where the nation receives high ranks for the employability of its people and the vibrancy of its cities. Based on this year's NBI index, Simon and Holt noted that the fact that Japan is now the most admired country on earth confirms that the global balance of soft power is shifting before our eyes. We are in a new order. The 2023 Holt Epsos Nation Brands Index is the first unmistakable sign that the Asian century has begun. In the meantime, Ukraine's NBI rank has decreased significantly as the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. Between 2017 and 2022, Ukraine enjoyed a relatively stable reputation, consistently landing in the fourth tier of measured NBI countries. However, this year, Ukraine fell from 47th to 57th due to respondents' low willingness to visit, invest, work, and live in this country for a substantial period. The example of Ukraine demonstrates the idea that building a brand requires significant time and effort, yet its loss can happen rather quickly. And where does Taiwan stand on the chart? Well, Taiwan ranks 22 out of 60 nations on the NBI index and is the fourth nation from the Asia-Pacific region. Despite the current geopolitical issues and economic slowdown facing this island nation, Taiwan has moved up 9 places compared to the 2022 scores. Especially when we look at National Personality Association, which involve thinking of a nation as a personality, Taiwan ranks 3rd out of 60 countries for being creative. Taiwan should really leverage this high global appraisal and find its unique branding positioning and promotional strategies. From there, Taiwan can become an even more valuable brand on the global stage. Despite nation branding being a useful theoretical framework, branding a nation is not a simple task. For many scholars who tend to see nation branding through a critical lens, the branding or rebranding of a nation is a controversial and highly politicized activity. First, let's think about the danger of corporate governance. In today's world, modern political democracies are based on the principle of universal representation, ensuring that all voices in the society can be freely expressed within the public sphere. However, nation branding as a concept developed in the consulting industry. Nation branding achieved its success through the consolidation and centralization of brand strategies. These approaches go against democratic principles such as inclusiveness, open debate, and the sharing of power. Therefore, it is important to be cautious about how political elites might use nation branding for the purpose of nation building and public control. Second, let's examine the concept of nation branding from the perspective of political economy. Just as small companies cannot compete against large multinational corporations in marketing spending, financially weaker nations cannot compete with more affluent nations in the global media market for audience attention. Therefore, the political economy of nation branding reveals that it tends to reproduce existing economic hierarchies among nations. And finally, the discourse of nation branding suggests that national identity and culture are fixed items that can be communicated and visualized through logos, slogans, and strategic messaging. This is a form of reductionism that eliminates controversy and diversity to create consistent and streamlined brand narratives that can be promoted in an international market. Certain social groups, such as the poor, the elderly, and minorities, might be symbolically ignored to make the brand narratives more attractive to external audiences. In this way, nation branding narratives could become a manipulation of a nation's image, a false hope, rather than a true representation of the nation itself.